Today you see a mega cute blouse with an amazing sleeve detail here, big box pleat gathered into a little band, different lengths. My favorite color, and it's super wearable. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I have a really cute blouse to share. I made one version with a really nice fabric I've had for plenty of years. It was just begging to be made out of this because the fabric is perfect to show the details. What I'm showing you is a new design from Sinclair Patterns called Thea Boatneck Blouse. The title tells you what type of neckline we have here. It's a really nice rounded neckline. It's sort of wider over here, never wide enough to show your bra strap. Very nice. It's finished with facings on the inside. Now, as a design feature, there is a center front seam that's top stitched. It's got a clean finish on the inside. There's also a center back seam at the back, and the top section has a little slit, one loop and one button. Now, after sewing this and trying it on and everything, I did discover that you can actually put it on without undoing the loop and the button. My skill here at the back is not that amazing. So I think these center seams are really pretty in solids, top stitched. I think it's beautiful. It's a flared silhouette, really nice shaping over here with the bust dart. Cup sizes A, B, C, D, E, F. So that is super nice. Gently flared out, two lengths, a really deep hem facing, which gives it a really nice structure. I love that, love hem facings. And the sleeves, the cutest thing. You set it in like a regular sleeve, but before setting it in, you sew a pretty deep box pleat, an inverted box pleat right there, which gives it this really amazing look. And then here it's a little bit wider, gathered onto a small band. It can be short, a little longer, up to 7/8. Because the Thea blouse is brand new at Sinclair Patterns, it's 31% off. I'm not exactly sure until when. I will write it here, and you'll find it in the description box and the top of the comment section. If you choose to purchase it using my affiliate link, you don't pay anything extra. I just receive a small commission, and that is just one way that you can support what I do here, creating super helpful sewing content that you can watch without any cost over here on YouTube. You need light to medium weight fabric for this one, and it depends on how you want it to look. You can use the lightweight, they're still structured. It's going to just stand out a little further away from the body, show the details more of that silhouette that flares out. It'll certainly show the details of the sleeve nicer if you use something with a little more structure. So I'm talking cotton lawn, cotton poplin, chambray, 100% linen, linen-rayon blend, linen cotton blend, that type of thing. If you want a softer look, the pleat, the gathers, everything's just going to be softer, then you can use rayon. Rayon is nice and drapey. Not my favorite for sewing center back and center front seams though. I think it's a little bit more difficult to get a really smooth look. It is possible, it's just a little more difficult. So I would prefer a rayon twill or a rayon crepe, a rayon sateen maybe, something just a little bit heavier. A tencel would be amazing. Tencel twill would be too heavy. Fabrics I'd avoid as well in the structured ones would be denim, even if lightweight, I think would be too bulky. Cotton canvas, cotton twill, a cotton sateen, I think would be too heavy and too structured for the details here. You need some fusible interfacing for the facings. I'm actually adding some interfacing to the hem facings as well. You need one small button for the loop at the back. My fabric choice is a red, my favorite color, rayon linen blend. Rayon 70%, linen 30%, light to medium weight. It's got a nice amount of drape, but it's not excessive. It's just the perfect fabric in between structured and drapey, right there in the middle. And I love this type of fabric. I still have some left over for a simple skirt, so I hope I can make that happen and match it up with this all in red. I would be happy. Sizing, super good, from 0 to 30 US. Sinclair Patterns, other than all this size range, has height files as well. So check on this chart what height you fall into, petite, regular, and tall. That is going to help you, in the first step of fitting with vertical proportions. I think this is awesome. I'm a tall file. And then you go ahead and look at the size chart, the numbers, and see the circumferences. I'm sewing a size 14 with the CD cup size option. Cup size options, sewing the difference between your high and your full bust. I have a 3-inch difference, which makes me a C cup. I love these woven patterns with the cup sizes. They're just amazing. It's just going to be so smooth on the side, and I think that is awesome. You have about 3 inches of ease around the bust, lots at the waist because it's a flared silhouette, and around the hips anywhere from 4 to 6, just depends on the cup size and the size that you're choosing. The only fitting adjustment I know I have to make is make that bust dart a little lower, 3/4 of an inch, just cut out a little rectangle, scoot it down, and then I'm happy. That is a typical adjustment for me. I'm very, very shocked if I ever don't have to do that. I'm going to show you a lot of the sewing. And now at the end, for the hem facing, you're going to see I'm sneaking in footage from another blouse, another pattern, but it's the exact same technique. Seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. Not my favorite, but that's what it is. In the tutorial, you'll see French seams. I'm not a fan of French seams for my fabric choice. I think it's just too heavy for it. I'm very, very particular about French seams. And I always think it's a personal preference, the way that you want to finish seams. So I'm not doing that. I'm just serging and pressing my seams open. But in essence, it's still the same pattern. It's just a different finish that I've chosen. This might look harder than you think, but it's not. It's all very doable, and I'll show you in detail. I have all these pieces to interface for the Thea blouse. These are the facings for the neckline. The front is on the fold. Even though there's going to be a seam in the blouse, the facing is on the fold. But the back, that's separated into two because there's a little slit at the back. So those are separated. I just created a second piece so I can cut them all at the same time and I don't have to use the same pattern piece. And this one was meant to be on the fold, but I extended it so I could cut it in a single layer. Block fusing as always. White interfacing there, easy to see. Larger piece. And these are bottom facings for the hem. They're slightly curved. They're quite wide. The pattern doesn't suggest interfacing, but I always interface facings. Even if they're on the hem, it just makes it look more structured. It would be very hard for me to not interface a facing, so I'm going ahead and doing it. Plus, my interfacing is very, very light, so it's not like it's going to be super, super heavier or really stiff. So I'm going to go ahead and cut now. Always block fusing, keeps the original shape, conserves everything the same size, no shrinking. If the fabric shrunk with the interfacing, that's already happened when I fused it on. The pieces will end up being the same as the paper that I'm using as a reference, and that's what I want for anything that's interfaced. Here are the pattern pieces for the Thea blouse from Sinclair Patterns. Both of them are not cut on the fold, so both of them have a center seam. Both the front and the back. That seam is going to have a clean finish on the inside. 5/8 seam allowance for the whole thing will allow that. It's a boat neckline. The facing on the front is on the fold, but there is going to be a seam right here. There's a mark, there's going to be a little slit there. So these are two back facings. They are not on the fold. The facings for the hem, they're quite whitish. I have interfaced mine, and if you place them along the edge here, they match. And they're both on the fold. Remember, there's going to be a seam on the main, but the facings are on the fold. It avoids bulk. Sleeve is wider here on the top because there's a big inverted box pleat. There's the marks right there. And then all of this is going to be gathered into a little band right there. I'm doing the short sleeve. There's two longer sleeve options that you can do. And for the top, there's a longer one as well. Any woven neckline, of course, we have stay stitching for these because they both have a center seam. I'm sewing from the shoulder into the center for both the front and the back pieces. Seam allowance later is going to be 5/8. It's quite a huge seam allowance. So for stay stitching, 1/2 inch seam allowance is okay here. I like to start sewing darts from the tip, bust darts, just because I can regulate where the needle goes in. I do it by hand cranking right on the edge. I can regulate the speed, do a shorter stitch length in the beginning, and it just gives you such a neater point than starting from the wide part and then going to the narrow bit. No back tucking here on the tip. It's right on the edge. And then on this side, you can't even tell. It's so neat. I'm going to sew the center front seam. I had already pinned it from the beginning. As soon as I cut my pattern pieces, I already pinned them. So they're very nicely aligned. The seam allowance is 5/8 or an inch. This center front seam is totally decorative. If I wasn't doing a pattern test and I was using a print, for example, I would just fold that seam allowance away and just cut the front on the fold. But let's do it like the pattern shows. And this red linen is going to show it really nicely. So this is a seam that's going to be pressed open like that. And then this raw edge, you're going to fold it like that. So it's going to be nice and neat on both sides. Once that's folded like that, all the way from the top down to the bottom, we're going to top stitch that on both sides. And that's how the front and the back are going to be finished. The difference with the back is that there's going to be a slit there. This is another presser foot. This has an L on it. It's also a type of blind hem presser foot, but different. When you move this, it moves this edge in or out, so you can actually get whatever seam allowance you want, and it's really helpful. I've set it here to about 1/8 of an inch. The presser foot is going to help me sew really neatly on the edge. Because this is a linen-rayon blend and it's easy to press and it stays put, I haven't hand basted this. I'm just sewing with the seams pressed really neatly. But if I was working with slippery fabric, I would have hand basted this after pressing it so it wouldn't twist and move. That's how that looks. From the right side, you're going to have a stitch on both sides. So it's definitely a decorative seam. It doesn't have any fitting function or anything. It's just a design feature. So I think on a solid and on a fabric like this, it's worth it. But if I had a print, I would just cut it on the fold. I would leave the center back seam though, because there's a little slit, but I think it's a nice detail for a solid. So there's the center front seam done. The back seam is just pinned for now. We need to sew the shoulder seams first. So I've got them pinned. We're also going to sew the shoulder seams or the facings. So I've got that pinned as well. Now remember, with facings, you want to meet them up, the raw edges at the seam allowance, not on the top on the edge, or else it's wrong. It's the same here, 5/8. Right on the edge there and right on the edge there. So these are two seams with 5/8 of an inch, very short shoulder seams. One sneaky thing I did before this was serge everything. I serged the shoulder areas and the side seams separately. So I'm going to be pressing these seams open because it is a medium weight fabric. I think it's just nicer for this fabric. If I was working with something lighter like a rayon, then I wouldn't want to press everything open. Okay, there's the facing. I'm going to press that open. Once I press it open, I'm going to have excess shapes to trim there. And this outer edge here, I'm just going to serge it. On the pattern, the instruction says to fold it in, but I think this fabric is too heavy for that. I typically tend to prefer just flat facings and a serged edge. I do everything possible to make my garments as light as they can be. This is a scrap, and I'm going to cut a little piece. It's about 3/4 of an inch. Just under an inch here. I'm going to need such a tiny piece. I don't want to deal with turning this right sides out and everything. So I'm going to go to the iron and press both raw edges in like this. And then again, like that. And that's how I'm going to sew it. There it is, all pressed. I burnt myself a little bit, tiny pressing. And now I'm going to sew it right there on the edge. Super easy. Now I'm going to measure 2.5 inches here. I think that's going to work well for the 5/8 seam allowance and for my button later. The left wearer side, so if I put it on myself, this is going to be on the left back of me. I'm going to measure 5/8 down and draw a little line because that's the seam allowance we're going to use for the facing. And we want the loop to be right underneath the facing. So from the line, I'm going to place it right there and then right there. And I'm going to hand baste this in place and then forget that it's there. And then we can keep going with this. Okay, there we have the neckline and the facing pinned together. This is where I hand basted that loop right under the mark I had there to keep it in place. Back facing, shoulder seams match, goes all the way around. What I'm going to do is sew all of this around like that, under stitch, and then I'm going to come back and sew this little bit. I have it hand basted now just to hold it in place, but when I want to understitch, I'm going to have to take that off. But it's helpful there just so that it wiggles around less. So let's sew this neckline with the facing on 5/8 of an inch. I have it hand basted so I don't have to deal with pins. 5/8 is a difficult seam allowance to sew on curved areas, just harder to keep it accurate. So I have to concentrate a little bit more. I'm trimming the seam allowance in half because 5/8 is a lot. And then I'm snipping. It's a curved neckline, so you need to snip that. I'm going to understitch, but I'm not going to understitch from the very end. I'm going to leave a little bit free, about 3/4 of an inch, so it doesn't interfere with the next seam. So I have the facing on my right hand, the seam allowance is tucked in underneath, and I'm going to stitch on the edge. Okay, after sewing the neckline and understitching, we're going to sew these short ends. That's why I wanted this area free of understitching so it doesn't get in the way. So 2 little short seams, 5/8 seam allowance right here. And on this side that I'm sewing, on the left side, I have the loop tucked in between. I'm going to cut away some bulk here, but not all the way, just this area. When we flip it, the loop appears right there. Very nice. And on this side, there's nothing. Okay, now that that upper area is done, we can sew this center back seam. There's a little mark. That's where I'm going to start sewing, reinforce, and then sew all the way down. And then the finish is going to be the same as the front, tucking the seam allowance underneath. And here in this area as well. It's just going to be a little bit fiddlier, but it's in essence the same thing. I've pressed it the same as you saw me do in the front, only in this section I hand basted it, just so I can keep it neat. So I'm going to go and sew the same as you saw me do on the front, all the same. After sewing that, it'll be done, and then this is how you wear it. And you put a little button right there. I think it's super nice, delicate. After doing that, I'm going to hand baste this facing down and top stitch it all the way around so it doesn't move. I'm only going to top stitch the back facing, so from the shoulder there, just this section, because I like that staying in place. The front is just going to stay like this. I think it'll be neater. I really don't want to go through these seams and have another one there, but I can do a little bit of hand tacking right there in that seam allowance, right there in the middle, and the rest is going to stay nicely in place. And the stitching is going to help it stay in there as well. So I think for this fabric, I'm going to be happiest like that. I have a sleeve that's finished. I want to show you what the end result's going to be. So here is the pleat. I have given it a good press, but the basting stitches are there. That's the last thing that's going to come out once the sleeve is already in. That little seam has been sewn, and then at the bottom we have this narrow band and the sleeve gathered into there. Now on the inside, I kept it just serged, so I didn't fold it in, just to avoid bulk. And the way I finished it there was in the ditch. So it's very discreet. You can't even see the stitch. If you'd done it traditionally, you could have done the fold and you could have top stitched right there on the edge as well. Also acceptable. I just decided to do this just so that it's less bulk, basically avoiding that fold. It's all on the inside. It's neat. It's not going to unravel. It's just an alternative way to get the same look from the outside, basically. This is a sleeve. I have already serged this, so that's done. And now here we have this biggish pleat. There's 2 lines there. I did mark them with a friction pen. I'm going to pin them and I'm going to baste these together. I'm going to lengthen my stitch length because after the sleeve is set in and pressed nicely, I'm going to release that. So it's about a 2-inch basting stitch to hold it in place. This is an inverted box pleat, so from the wrong side, you want to distribute this volume half and half. There's a little mark right there that's going to help you. So just align where the seam is. And we're going to do a quick little stitch here just to keep it there and not move anywhere. Now that I'm here, I'm going to do my regular stitch that I do to help ease in the sleeve cap later on. So from the notch to the other notch. After you've done your box pleat, you can forget about it and just treat this sleeve as a regular sleeve for the setting in section. At the bottom, I'm going to do 2 gathering rows. I'm going to leave a little bit here free so it doesn't interfere with my seam later. And I'm going to do one at about 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to do another gathering row so that it's easier for me to get these gathers nice and even onto the small band. It's like a little narrow cuff. It's not interface. That's how it's going to be finished at the bottom. I'm going to use a 5/8 seam allowance later. So this second one is going to be at about 3/4 inch, so quite biggish. What I did with this little band here was just serge one of the long ends. and the raw edge, I pinned it to the sleeve, right sides together right there. It's the same color, but I know they're right sides together. So here on this side, I have done my gathering so that these both match. I left the extremes here not gathered so it doesn't affect the seam under here. I don't like gathers right there next to that seam, so they're a little bit spaced out. And now we're just going to sew this together with the gathers on top so you can regulate them a little bit while you sew. 5/8 seam allowance right here. I created the distance between the two gathering stitches so that my seam is right in the middle now at 5/8. After that, of course, I'm going to trim this down. It's just so much fabric in there. I'm just reduce it by half basically. Now we can sew the seam of the sleeve. Now I'm going to sew it like this so that this seam allowance is headed towards the little band at the bottom, so facing down like that. And I'm going to put a pin here to match these up perfectly. I'm not going to sew through the pin. I'm going to remove it like a millisecond before I go over it, but I really want these seams to match up. I'm going to go ahead and press the seam open like this. And then I'm going to press all the seam allowance going down towards the band. Everything's pressed. This is raw, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be covered. So let's turn this sleeve right sides out. Now from here, I'm going to start folding it to the inside. I'm going to catch it right here where I'm going to stitch in the ditch. And I'm going to make sure I'm coming out right where the serged area is. So I've got about 1/4 inch hanging here on the inside. So I hope you can see what I'm doing. I pin it. I come out here, right there, bring out my needle and match it up there. And I'm going to pin it all the way around. I stitch in the ditch with my regular presser foot. I'm just careful. I don't use an actual stitch in the ditch foot. At this point, I feel like I'm almost done. I have already assembled the sleeves on their own. They're ready to go to set in there. But before setting in, you need to do the side seams. I have pinned those. I'm going to just sew them, press them open, set in my sleeves. And then at the bottom, we have this hem facing. At the bottom, see, it has a shape like this, like a smiley face sort of thing. This longer end at the bottom has marks, reference marks, and that you find to match right here. So the shorter end right here, that is the edge that you either fold in or serge. I have just serged mine. So that's what's going to be up here once you sew it right sides together and you flip it. But I will insert, it's all the same thing. This is the front facing. I've written F's over it so I don't get confused. It would follow the same shape as the bottom of this top. If I put this right on top, it'll match perfectly. All we need to do is put this on top, right sides together, and this is how this is going to be sewn and then flipped to the other side. So this is going to be the same for the front over here and for the back on the other side. I have little marks in the center and I'm going to match that up with the center front seam. I do have a center front seam. If you don't have one, then just make a mark on the center front that would be on the fold. So I'm just going to put a few pins here just to hold this in place. Now this is the back, and I'm going to take my back facing and place it on top as well. And I'm going to put a few pins over here as well. So with this partially pinned right there, I'm going to sew the side seams of these facings. If it's hard for you to visualize how a curved facing goes, it's just easier to place it like this, right on top of the table, pin it in a few places, and then sew the side seams. That's what I'm doing. Okay, I've been to my table and pinned everything together. You know that everything appears magically pinned in this channel. Side seams of the facing match the side seams of the top. And now we can sew this together. And then we're going to be trimming it a little bit before flipping this to the other side. I'm trimming this to leave it at about 1/4 inch in here. Now this curve, because it's a hem that's longer in the center front and it curves shorter in the sides, it's a convex curve. It means it curves out. That means you don't need to snip anything because you're not going to have tension on the seam when you flip it to the other side. What we are going to do though is understitch. So we're going to push the seam allowance towards the facing under here, like that. And we're going to sew right there on the edge. And I'm going to use my presser foot to guide and make it easier. I have the facing on my left hand and the seam allowance is tucked right underneath, and this presser foot is helping me sew on the edge super neatly. After I go all the way around, I'm going to serge this edge over here so that it's nice and neat, and then we can flip the facing to the other side. After serging the edges, I've been to iron and pressed that facing to the inside. I've given it a good hand baste at the iron while everything was super flat. The understitching is going to keep it nice and neat on the inside without the seams showing on the edge, which is what you always want with the facing. I've basted it on the inner area of the serged edge as a reference, so that is my guide. The basting stitch is also my guide as to where to top stitch from, so it's nice and neat. Doing it from the right side of the fabric this time, just so I can really see what I'm doing, how it's going to look. And that's it. It's as easy as that. And the finish of the hem is going to be super different, nice and structured. I think it's really good for linen. Here is my version of the Thea blouse. Check out this amazing drape. It's so lovely. Boat neckline over here. The facing on the front, I left it loose, just hanging in there. I did tuck it down behind that seam. There's a little bit of seam allowance there, so I did that. And then at the back, I did top stitch it down because you can't really regulate what you're doing at the back and it might flap out and you can't see it, you know. So I prefer to have the back top stitched. There is a little slit, loop and button. I'm never going to undo that because, as I said, you could just pull it on over your head and the circumference here is enough for my head at least. Little slit there, all top stitched, very neat. The hem facing at the bottom also top stitched right there. This would look different if you just hemmed it normal. You could. The hem facing gives it that little extra. These sleeves, look at that box pleat right there. Matches the shoulder seam. So pretty. And then slightly gathered into this small band. I went rogue and I used the serger for mine and pressed my seams open. This fabric is way too heavy for French seams. I would not do it. I would be very unhappy if I felt forced to do a finish that I didn't mash up with the fabric choice. So I'm just making decisions based on the fabric choice. There is a facing serged as well. I didn't fold it in, you know, I didn't top stitch it here. I love that. I'm very happy. This finish over here was a little different with this as well, just to avoid bulk. This finish here of the center seams is just so pretty. It makes me so happy to look at from the inside. I love it. It's just so nice, so wearable. This is my Thea blouse from Sinclair Patterns. This is a size 14 with a toe file, and the only fitting adjustment I did here was to lower the bust dart by 3/4 of an inch. I have the CD cup size option. Bust dart is very discreet. You barely know that it's there, but it makes a huge difference in the fit. It's got a lovely boat neckline, super nice, has center seams in the front and the back. This is a linen-rayon blend, so I did top stitch to highlight these details. Flared silhouette with a deep hem facing, and you'll see the details of the sleeve up closer. So cute. Because this style has more ease, I've paired it with a straighter fitting skirt. The red top with the black and white bottoms is a classic thing for me. I love this. I have top stitched the center front, done the same in the back, and the facing is also top stitched down here. It's quite deep. It makes this for nice and weighty and just amazing. Absolutely love it. Check out the ease. Very wearable. Check out the facing up closer and the depth of this neckline. And if you're wondering if this fits over my head, it absolutely does. But you do have the slit, the loop and the button at the back for ease. I left the facing not top stitched here in the front, but I did top stitch it in the back. The sleeves are extremely cute. They have a pretty deep box pleat right there. And then at the bottom, it's wider. It's gathered onto a small band. And you can do this in 3 different lengths. I just chose the short one because it matches my weather. Comfort in the shoulders. You can move around and live your life. I love the depth of this neckline and the shape. I think boat necklines are always so classy. And this does fit over my head. I think if you wanted, you could totally skip the little slit at the back if you wanted to simplify things. Sometimes, because I have curly hair, my hair gets stuck on the button. So that's just something that happens to me. But I still think it's a really nice detail. So cute. I love how this turned out. You can do a longer version if you think this is too short, but I think this length is perfect for me. And it was such a delight sewing it. I loved all the techniques. Nothing really hard, just amazing results. Here is a more casual look with my Thea blouse. Jeans are never going to be a bad choice. Because of the silhouette, the flared silhouette, I have a fitted pair of jeans, but they do flare out at the bottom. I think the flare design of the jean balances out the volume of the sleeves. I feel quite balanced in this outfit and extremely comfortable. Matchy with the sneakers, why not? This is such a fun outfit and the blouse is so comfortable. And it's not just a basic, it's got lovely details that really dress up the basic jeans, you know? Love this. If I would have had time to make a second version and I did not have time, I would have simplified it and chosen a print, rayon satin or a rayon crepe. I have a lot of that. And I would have just done the facing all the way around, both on the fold. I would have omitted the center front and the center back seams. And for a really lightweight rayon, I might have not done the hem facing as well. And so it would look in essence the same, but it would be a lot simplified. If you want to try a simplified version, I'm pretty sure you can. And the visual with a print would look pretty much the same. It would have the same silhouette. So I think center front seams, center back seams, very pretty. Love them top stitched in this fabric. But if I was doing a print, I probably would not want them there. That is my version. I'm very happy with it. I hope I can get around to making another one of these. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the sleeve. It's just so pretty. That's a 10 out of 10 for me. 31% off. Check it out in the description box and the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this one and give it a go. It's a really lovely design. I loved it. That's all from me, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.